Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another oil painting tutorial. Right now I'm using a flat 1-inch tack-on bristled brush and I'm laying in quinacridone magenta and blending it into cadmium yellow, and then I just blend all of this smooth to create a basic sunset sky. So we've already established where my mountain peaks are going to be and a kind of a little rough sketch of where my clouds are going to be laid out. And then I'm going to go back in, and this is with a scrumbler brush. It's just a really soft, kind of messy looking brush actually, but it really scrubs the paint onto the canvas really well. And I just bought it at Michael's. Before we get much further, I'm gonna put this sketch that I've done, and I just cut it out with some scissors, and I'm gonna outline it onto the canvas. Filled it all in, did all the basic colors for it, and filled in a little bit of the more of the clouds. And I'm just kind of working around the eagle's wing, just softening up the clouds in the sky and adding some of the distant clouds. As the clouds get away from the sun, they start to get a little redder. A lot of different color clouds. I'm bouncing between a few different brushes, seeing which ones work the best. I'm sticking with, most of the time here, it's a little soft flat head, and it blends a lot of the clouds really well. I bounce around a lot because I would like color harmony in this, and the way that is achieved is using generally the same color throughout the painting. Now I'm going through and I'm adding highlights on these very distant clouds because the sun is behind shining through, so just the tops of them are getting highlights. And I'm using a very small liner brush to get these. The further the clouds go in the distance, the smaller they become to where they almost just look like a field. Still using that liner brush to add those highlights around the clouds. And then I'm also using a little soft blender brush to soften up the highlights. So I decided the lower clouds were not working at all, and that's another reason why I hadn't even been talking about them, because I eventually ended up putting gesso over the top of it and just starting over. One thing that I noticed when I stepped away from all those clouds is they were looking too even, all the same. They were all the same shape, they were all the same height and width, and that just doesn't work in nature at all. If you've been watching my videos, I always say vary it up. Never make the same thing have a pattern in nature, because that just isn't normal. And that's what they were doing. So I made them all different, made them all a different size and everything, and I soften the bottom and make a little bit of the tops a little bit crispier. And then when I did that too, these clouds further in the background, they're too big in comparison, so that's why I took that yellow and I put it over the top of that one cloud that kind of looks funny now. So I'm going back through right now and I'm defining this eagle. When I went through and did the clouds in the sky again, some blues got in my wing and everything, so I'm going back over and I'm coloring it in, fixing up little areas, adjusting the colors, and making it look a little bit more realistic. Now, because the sky has so much bright yellow in it, I need the clouds to reflect that color because that color should be bouncing off the clouds. So that is what I'm doing right now. I'm adding highlights to these clouds and I'm blending them backwards because the light should be bouncing off of them and then fade away into the dark of the cloud, which would be essentially be the shadow of the clouds. And this technique works really well when the underneath layer of paint is dry and all I'm doing is adding the highlight and blending them. As you can see now, I wasn't happy with the way that the back clouds were looking. Like I said before, they looked too big in comparison of what they should be. When you go into the further back you go, the smaller things should get, and that's how you can show some depth in it. And they just weren't, I wasn't achieving what I wanted to. So if you notice in this one, I've added all the tiny little clouds and they get smaller and smaller the further they go back. The inspiration that I had behind doing this image was I was in a plane one time years and years ago and we were flying just above the clouds and the blanket of clouds that we were flying right above was so beautiful and all I have to go on is this memory from 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago when I was in that plane and I've looked and looked and looked for reference photos, but I didn't have any when I did this photo or this painting. Um, so it was very difficult, and that is why I redid these clouds so many times, was because I just didn't have a reference photo to go off of. So it was kind of like a trial and error. Now I'm going back through again with my little liner brush and a very small round brush to blend. I'm adding highlights here and there. Now the color I used in the very beginning, the first layer of highlights, is a semi-transparent color. So after that dried, I went back over the highlights again. And the reason I like doing it that way is when you work with a transparent layer, or when you work with a transparent color and you build up multiple layers using that transparent color, it creates this depth in whatever you're doing that you can't get with just an opaque single layer. So that's really, really why I love working with some transparent colors and why I really love it's layering, but it's also called glazing. And here we are doing the very final touches at the end. So I hope you all really loved that video. If you did, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment letting me know what you thought about the video. And share this with your friends if you really love it. Maybe they would love to see it. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.